Hollywood loves nothing more than a prestige drama polished to shine like solid gold. But every so often, the so-called sure things crash with the force of a lead balloon. These are the movies that had the pedigree, the performances, the glossy cinematography, and the perfect release dates. Yet, when award season rolled around, they stumbled. Why did the Academy turn away from projects practically designed to win? Stick around, because some of these misfires will surprise you, and others will make you wonder how anyone thought they'd work. The Majestic 2001. On paper, this looked like a home run. Jim Carrey, fresh off a string of comedies and acclaimed dramatic turns in The Truman Show and Man on the Moon, teamed with Frank Darabont, the director of The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. The Majestic aimed to be a love letter to old Hollywood, small-town America, and patriotism during the 1950s blacklist era. Sounds like a perfect Oscar contender, right? The setup was classic prestige. Carrey plays Peter Appleton, a screenwriter who loses his memory and finds himself in a quiet California town. The townspeople mistake him for a long-lost war hero, and he embraces this new identity until the shadow of McCarthyism crashes down on him. With themes of identity, loyalty, and the power of community, it checked every box that usually gets awards voters reaching for tissues and ballots. But what unfolded on screen was something else. Instead of Frank Capra's warmth and subtle optimism, audiences got heavy-handed speeches and syrupy sentimentality. The pacing dragged, the symbolism was on the nose, and what was supposed to feel nostalgic instead felt artificial. Carrey, to his credit, gave an earnest performance, but critics complained it was a performance lost inside a movie too desperate for approval. Financially, The Majestic was a bust, pulling in only a fraction of its budget. Awards voters didn't take the bait either. No nominations, no golden statuettes, just silence. Looking back, the film has become a footnote in both Carrey's and Darabont's careers, a reminder that chasing Oscar glory too directly often leaves you empty-handed. The Majestic wanted to soar, but it barely got off the ground. J. Edgar 2011. Leonardo DiCaprio as J. Edgar Hoover, directed by Clint Eastwood. That sentence alone sounds like a ticket to awards season glory. Warner Brothers clearly thought they had lightning in a bottle, an epic biopic of one of America's most powerful and controversial figures, starring one of the best actors of his generation, helmed by a filmmaker who had just won Oscars for Million Dollar Baby and had been nominated multiple times before. Expectations could not have been higher. The film promised a sweeping look at Hoover's decades-long career as head of the FBI, exploring both his professional achievements and personal contradictions. DiCaprio threw himself into the role, using a mix of vocal inflection, physical transformation, and hours under heavy prosthetics to age Hoover across multiple decades. Early previews suggested this was his big chance to finally win Best Actor, a prize that had eluded him despite several nominations. Then the movie actually came out. Instead of a gripping portrait, critics got a stiff, uneven narrative that felt more like a lecture than a story. Eastwood's muted, washed-out visual style, which had worked for somber dramas before, here just looked lifeless. The timeline was confusing, skipping back and forth without rhythm. And the makeup, meant to make DiCaprio look older, became a distraction. Rather than drawing audiences deeper into the character, it pulled them out of the story entirely. While DiCaprio was praised for his commitment, even fans admitted he was stuck inside a film that never figured out what it wanted to say. Was Hoover a hero, a tyrant, or something in between? The movie seemed unwilling to decide, and that indecision doomed it. J. Edgar received no major Oscar nominations and quickly faded from awards conversation. For DiCaprio, it was just another near miss on the road to his eventual victory. For Eastwood, it was proof that not every prestige subject guarantees a win. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, 2011. Sometimes a film arrives that feels like it was engineered in a lab for Oscar night. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close had all the right pieces. A Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, Stephen Daldry in the director's chair, and a cast that included Tom Hanks, Sandra Bullock, and Max von Sydow. Released just a decade after 9/11, it aimed to deliver a heartfelt story about grief, healing, and the resilience of the human spirit. This was supposed to be an easy nomination magnet. The story follows Oscar, a young boy who loses his father in the World Trade Center tragedy. Clinging to a mysterious key left behind, he sets out on a journey through New York City, searching for answers and connection. On paper, it's a touching premise. On screen, however, critics felt it was manipulative. Reviewers complained that the film leaned too heavily on sentimentality, using tragedy as a shortcut to emotion rather than letting the story speak for itself. Thomas Horn, the child actor at the center, was ambitious but polarizing. Some viewers found him powerful, while others thought his performance leaned toward grating. Max von Sydow earned praise as the silent renter who helps Oscar on his quest, but even his legendary presence couldn't save the film from being branded calculated Oscar bait. The backlash was swift. Critics called it exploitative, overly polished, and more concerned with awards than authenticity. And yet, in one of the most shocking twists, the Academy still nominated it for Best Picture. The result? An outcry from film fans and journalists who declared it one of the least deserving nominees in Oscar history. It won nothing, left no cultural mark, and today it's remembered less as a touching drama than as a cautionary tale about chasing golden statues too hard. The Butler, 2013. Forrest Whitaker, Oprah Winfrey, Lee Daniels. That trio alone made The Butler look like it was heading straight to the Dolby Theater stage. Add in a sprawling narrative that touched every major American president from Eisenhower to Reagan, and the Oscar math seemed simple. Epic historical sweep plus powerhouse performances usually equals awards glory. At least, that was the plan. The film tells the story of Cecil Gaines, a White House butler who serves 8 different administrations, giving him a front-row seat to the major social and political upheavals of the 20th century. It's the kind of premise that screams prestige, loaded with moments designed to spark standing ovations. Forrest Whitaker delivered his usual gravitas. Oprah Winfrey drew strong notices for her dramatic return, and the supporting cast was stacked with familiar faces playing presidents and historical figures. But here's the problem. Audiences came out, critics did not. Many reviewers praised the acting, but complained the film was formulaic, episodic, and heavy on melodrama. Instead of offering fresh insights into American history, The Butler often felt like a checklist of greatest hits moments, staged to tug emotions rather than provoke thought. While it performed well at the box office and touched many viewers personally, the Academy kept its distance. Despite awards campaigns that pushed hard for nominations, The Butler came up empty at the Oscars. Some called it a victim of overcrowded competition that year, but most agreed the film simply wasn't strong enough to stand out. What was supposed to be a defining work of prestige cinema became just another almost in awards season lore. Today, it's remembered fondly by fans, but sits in that frustrating limbo, a movie that was everywhere for a moment, but went nowhere when it mattered most. All the King's Men, 2006. Remaking an Oscar-winning classic is always a gamble, but when you load up a film with Sean Penn, Jude Law, Kate Winslet, and Anthony Hopkins, expectations skyrocket. All the King's Men, based on Robert Penn Warren's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel about the rise and fall of a populist politician, looked like it was made to repeat the success of its 1949 predecessor, which won Best Picture. Instead, it turned out to be a disaster so large that people still ask, how did this happen? The story is a powerhouse. Willie Stark, a small-town idealist who rises to political power only to be consumed by corruption. It's Shakespearean, it's timely, and it's exactly the kind of material awards voters usually drool over. Penn threw himself into the role with his trademark intensity, and Jude Law's conflicted journalist was supposed to ground the story. With James Horner on music and a prestige release date, the studio expected trophies. But what audiences got was a turgid, overwrought mess. The film was slammed for its confusing structure, meandering pace, and dialogue that felt like it was read out of a textbook. Instead of fiery political drama, viewers were trapped in a slog that seemed to drain the energy out of every scene. Sean Penn's performance, normally a selling point, was described as shouty and exhausting, while the rest of the cast looked lost in a movie that didn't know how to use them. Critics tore it apart, audiences stayed away, and the Academy ignored it completely. The 2006 version of All the King's Men not only failed to live up to the original, it became a textbook example of how not to remake an Oscar-winning film. Today, it's rarely mentioned except as a cautionary tale, proving that throwing together big names and source material with prestige doesn't guarantee greatness. Sometimes it just guarantees embarrassment. 2009. The director of Chicago, Daniel Day-Lewis, Penelope Cruz, Marion Cotillard, Nicole Kidman, Judi Dench, Kate Hudson, Sophia Loren. That cast list alone looked like an award ceremony waiting to happen. Rob Marshall's 9, a glossy musical adaptation of Fellini's 8½, was hyped as the next Chicago, which had stormed the Oscars just a few years earlier. With that kind of pedigree, how could it possibly fail? Spoiler, spectacularly. The story follows Guido Contini, a famous Italian director struggling with creative block, personal turmoil, and complicated relationships with the women in his life. Sounds like the perfect recipe for emotional depth and powerhouse performances. And indeed, the actors gave it everything they had. Cruz earned some praise, Cotillard delivered as always, and Dench tried to inject a spark. But despite all that talent, the film itself was lifeless. The problem wasn't the performers, it was everything else. The musical numbers felt stiff, strangely staged, and forgettable. Instead of bursting with energy, they landed with a thud. The emotional through line was muddled, leaving audiences unsure what they were supposed to feel. Even Daniel Day-Lewis, usually magnetic, came across as disconnected. Rather than dazzling viewers, 9 felt like a pale imitation of prestige cinema, weighed down by style over substance. When award season came, 9 managed a few technical nominations, but the hoped-for flood of recognition never arrived. Critics called it hollow, audiences ignored it, and the film quickly faded into the background. What should have been a towering musical event turned into a cautionary tale. All-star casts and flashy direction can't cover up a hollow center. Instead of dancing its way to Oscars, 9 stumbled off stage, remembered more for its wasted potential than its artistry. Collateral Beauty, 2016. If there was ever a title that begged for awards attention, it was Collateral Beauty. Will Smith, Helen Mirren, Kate Winslet, Keira Knightley, Edward Norton, and Naomi Harris again, an ensemble that seemed untouchable. The premise sounded heavy but profound. A grieving man writes letters to abstract concepts like love, time, and death, and the universe answers back. Done right, that's tear-jerking, awards-grabbing material. Done wrong? It's this movie. Smith plays Howard, a man shattered by personal tragedy. His co-workers hire a troupe of actors to impersonate the abstractions he's been writing to, hoping to snap him out of his spiral. That's where things get messy. The setup, meant to be profound, instead struck many as contrived and bizarre. The story leaned so hard on sentiment that it tipped into parody. Viewers didn't cry, they rolled their eyes. Critics called the film manipulative, contrived, and tonally confused. Smith tried valiantly, channeling deep emotion, but even his star power couldn't rescue the film from itself. Instead of earning respect, it became a punchline, lumped in with the most obvious examples of Oscar bait gone wrong. Audiences didn't show up either, leaving the film with weak box office and a bruised reputation. By the time awards season rolled around, the movie wasn't just ignored, it was actively mocked. Collateral Beauty didn't earn nominations, it earned derision. For Will Smith, it was another reminder that chasing awards too directly often backfires. Today, the film's legacy is less about beauty and more about the danger of pushing sentiment without substance. The Academy saw right through it, and so did everyone else. The Book of Henry, 2017. Every so often, a movie comes along that makes you wonder how anyone thought it would work. Colin Trevorrow, fresh off the blockbuster success of Jurassic World, decided to pivot to a small, personal drama. The Book of Henry promised a mix of heartfelt family storytelling and moral weight, with Naomi Watts leading the cast and child actor Jaden Martell at the center. On paper, it looked like an offbeat prestige gamble. Instead, it became one of the most baffling misfires of the decade. The premise is wild. Henry, a child genius, leaves behind an elaborate plan for his mother to carry out after he is gone. The plan? Confronting their neighbor, who Henry believes is harming his stepdaughter. The film tries to juggle quirky coming-of-age moments with serious drama, but the tonal shifts are so jarring it feels like two completely different movies stitched together. Critics were stunned, not in a good way. What was meant to be moving came across as bizarre and uncomfortable. Reviewers described it as manipulative, melodramatic, and downright confusing. The performances were decent, but even seasoned pros like Naomi Watts couldn't make sense of the script. What was billed as a tender drama turned into one of the most ridiculed films of 2017. Awards season ignored it entirely, and the backlash was so severe it impacted Trevorrow's career trajectory, contributing to him being removed from directing a major franchise sequel. Instead of elevating him into the ranks of prestige, filmmakers, The Book of Henry became shorthand for overreaching Oscar bait that collapses under its own ambition. What was supposed to be heartfelt ended up infamous. The Soloist, 2009. When you line up Robert Downey Jr. at the height of his comeback and Jamie Foxx, fresh off an Oscar win, you don't just expect a good movie, you expect awards. The Soloist looked like the perfect storm of prestige, based on a true story, set in Los Angeles, exploring themes of music, mental health, and redemption. Add in Joe Wright, the director of Atonement, and the hype machine was in full swing. This was supposed to be a major contender. The story centers on Nathaniel Ayers, a once promising musician played by Fox, who struggles with mental illness and homelessness. Downey Jr. plays Steve Lopez, the journalist who discovers him and tries to help. The real-life friendship between Lopez and Ayers was moving and inspiring. The film, however, couldn't capture that magic. Critics noted that The Soloist leaned into cliches instead of authenticity. The script seemed more interested in tugging heartstrings than developing its characters, and the pacing dragged. While Fox gave a committed performance, it was often overshadowed by melodramatic flourishes. Downey Jr., coming off Iron Man and brimming with charisma, felt oddly muted in a role that gave him little to do beyond reacting. Originally slated for release in late 2008, right in the thick of award season, the film was delayed until spring 2009, a signal that the studio had lost confidence. When it finally landed, audiences barely noticed. It didn't score with critics, it didn't perform at the box office, and it certainly didn't land the Oscar nominations it was designed to chase. Instead of being remembered as an uplifting drama, The Soloist became a footnote, a film with the right ingredients, but the wrong execution. For Fox and Downey Jr., it was a reminder that awards-caliber performances can't overcome a weak story. For Wright, it was a stumble that made critics wonder if Atonement had been a fluke. The Soloist aimed for harmony, but ended on a flat note. The Beloved, 1998. Sometimes prestige projects collapse under their own weight, and no film illustrates that better than Beloved. Based on Toni Morrison's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, directed by Jonathan Demme, and produced by Oprah Winfrey, who also starred alongside Danny Glover and Thandie Newton, this film had every element needed for Oscar greatness. The source material was revered, the talent was undeniable, and the themes of trauma, memory, and survival were powerful. So what went wrong? Practically everything. The story follows Seth, a formerly enslaved woman haunted by memories of her past and the arrival of a mysterious young woman named Beloved. Morrison's novel is layered, poetic, and deeply symbolic, and many considered it unfilmable. Demi's adaptation proved them right. The movie struggled to translate Morrison's complex prose into cinematic storytelling. What felt haunting on the page often came across as confusing or heavy-handed on screen. The tone veered from surreal to melodramatic, leaving audiences unsure how to engage. Despite Newton's chilling performance and Oprah's passionate commitment to the project, the film felt weighed down by its ambition. Financially, it was a disaster, opening the same weekend as Bride of Chucky. Yes, a horror sequel about a killer doll, and getting trounced at the box office. Critics were divided, some praising the effort, while others found it impenetrable. Instead of dominating award season, Beloved was ignored by the Academy and quickly faded from conversation. For Oprah, it was a deeply personal disappointment, as she had championed the film for years. For Demi, it was a stumble after his earlier triumphs like The Silence of the Lambs. And for audiences, it was a reminder that not all acclaimed novels can or should make the leap to film. Beloved aimed to be unforgettable, but for most viewers, it became something they'd rather forget. Prestige, awards buzz, big names, powerful themes. All the right ingredients don't always make the right recipe. From The Majestic to Beloved, these films remind us that chasing Oscar glory can backfire in spectacular fashion. Which one of these Oscar bait disasters do you think deserved a second chance, and which never should have been made? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies Hollywood tried and failed to crown as champions. After all, in the race for Oscars, not every contender makes it across the finish line.